tell her. Matt? Have you ever done that? You're mute, by the way.
No, it's green. I said it in a minute. Turn it green. It's green. It's on. No, that's okay. I saw it. He just walked. No.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to a meeting of the Jefferson City Council Budget Committee. I call the meeting to order. Ms. Donaldson, would you call the roll, please?
Fitzwater, Hensley,
Present.
Kimna, Lester,
Here.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Here.
Spicer,
Present.
Vogt, Ward. Here. Wiseman.
Present.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is committee discussion of the budget. So this would be the time when we could either make comments or ask questions about presentations we've seen already, or present items for the parking lot and for potential changes, pieces of the budget. I will kick it off. I asked for a few items to be thrown on in advance. I will go through those briefly. So I'm going to propose a few items here as a slate. That is, I would like them all when the time comes, and it's not going to be tonight. It'll be Thursday night. But when the time comes, I would like these voted on as a package rather than as separate pieces. So what I've got here would fully fund the remainder of the police department's car request. It's nine cars remaining. There were 13 total, I believe, and 4 of them are already accounted for. So this would fund the other 9. I think it might be is it in the general fund? ARPA dollars?
Based on the email that you just sent.
Yeah.
Where I provided the information about the restrictions around using the ARPA funds for police vehicles and equipment being tied to increases in gun violence. You just told us to put the body and in-car cameras out of
Okay.
sales tax G, and that we
Uh,
wouldn't use ARPA funds for the police vehicles.
No, I think we've had a misunderstanding.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to go back to that.
So you want to
That's sort of the
fund
opposite.
9 vehicles in the general fund?
We'll just have to rework it.
Okay.
I don't
We'll figure
really
it out
totally
later.
understand what happened here. No, I read, never mind, we're not gonna get into it. I read your email as being only about body cams, which wasn't really something I was planning to bring out of ARPA anyway. So not sure how the cars got in there. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and remove the rest of my items because we're gonna have to start over. Try to fix this on the fly in front of everybody. Anybody else have any comments or questions or suggestions? Is there any discussion from the committee about any budget-related item?
I have and I guess it's directed towards Director Morash regarding the replacement of, again, those streetlights. Are those streetlights currently functioning? You're just wanting to, they just need to be changed over to LED, upgraded to LED?
Yeah, I believe they're currently functioning. It's just, they're in
Okay.
style, and we have streets, Hardy, Capitol, still some out on Mission Drive, scattered about. So it's just, good for the staff to go ahead and replace those. They burn less electricity, but they also, then it's easier to work on for the staff. They kind of know what part they have in stock.
All right, and then Director Sanders regarding the replacement of the bottoms of your glass recycling dumpsters. Are those totally out of commission? There's 2 of them.
We have 4 total. 2 of them, they are in service. The trouble is when they are picked up, glass remains and falls out. They're not used for, they're not transporting along roads. So basically, they are picked up and dumped into a truck, but that leaves behind a mess, and it's getting worse. And at some point, they're not going to
Rust
hold
out.
anything at all. One is really a lot worse than the other, but we'd like to, the second one that is bad is not quite as bad, but we don't believe either of them are going to make it 2 more years. And we'd like to get on that every other year of just spending $5,000 and, replace them all over an 8-year period.
And our community uses those
Yes, yes, we,
extensively.
Ripple Glass takes the glass, and in return, it doesn't go in the landfill, extending the life of the landfill. And also, I believe it's been Habitat, but we do get like insulation in return for participating in the program, so it does help keep the cost low for Habitat building their homes and putting people into
Okay.
housing. So the community does get something in return for participating in this program.
Okay, thank you. Well, I too would like to see funded the remaining of the police cars and also body cams. If we need to work on how we're going to fund those items, I guess we can do that once that gets figured out. But I would, since we're releasing suspects due to the fact that we don't have appropriate equipment for court, I would like to put on the parking lot, the Polycom legal. And I would also, yes, it was 3,000. And then replacement of one of the dumpsters at 5, and use the 12 grand to offset it. That still gives us a little bit extra there, but since those lights are functioning, and I'd like to use I think it was 12 grand for the replacement of the street lights. And it was just, I think, one. Someone wants to put the other one in there, that's fine, but I was just trying not to go over the 12 grand. That gives us cushion. Someone has something else.
So just a question. Couldn't the Polycom, seems like one of the things that could be very well covered under CBG COVID grant. Of course, I know we don't have that yet, but it seems like it would fall within that as something that would be needed related to any type of epidemic or remote type of court activities.
If that's a question, I would think probably so. For $3,000, we could probably just take it out of this year's year-ending fund and make it easy if you wanted to, but that one probably would be eligible under rescue plan funding if that's what you're thinking about. That one's a little bit closer. I'd have to take a little closer look at that, but probably. My view, I don't know if Ryan and Margie have a different thought.
Councilwoman Wiseman.
I was going to fund the 2 items that I put on the parking lot with the 12 grand. In the past, we always had to offset yeah. And I think that's why she put it in parentheses.
So sorry, I wasn't on mic. And I had asked about this in a previous meeting. I'd like to fund some things with the RAVE contract. That's a $20,000 contract. That's line 10, 390, 5470. I don't think we've been using that. It seems as if Twitter and Facebook have been what we've been using. Though I think one of my items that I'd like to use, or I'd like to instead use a pink sheet, is for the e-procurement contract management system. And that's for $15,000, but I think that the same question then applies, is that something, I know we're asking you all these questions and
Possibly. Could be used for rescue fund.
so if we go ahead and fund that now and we are reimbursed for funding that, is that something that we get to put back in the general fund and use later?
Yes, if we reimburse ourselves.
Councilman Spencer.
Steve, what's the amount that you have left of the end of year account balances that you had mentioned about the $3,000 expenditure for the court software? Do you have an idea of where we're going to be at by the end of the year,
Well,
projection wise?
we have a financial report that we present monthly to the finance committee that has an estimate for end of year fund balance. If that's what you're referring
Yes,
to.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm-
so there is some amount over the 17% minimum general fund balance reserve.
It's hard to estimate that number right now. You know, it comes from vacancies and all those kinds of things, but it also, you know, has an impact with, you know, where revenues are, and we've got a couple of revenue line items that are falling a little bit short.
So, Chair, going back, Councilman Wiseman, did you want to put up funding for the e-procurement?
That was the rave, the $20,000.
Okay, but the rave 20,000 is the budget authority for that line item, but there's also 10,000 that we get in revenue from the county to reimburse us for that. So in effect, the rave only costs us 10,000.
Okay. Okay, I didn't realize that was only a $10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, I still want to put rave on there
As a funding source?
as a funding source. Yeah, and instead, since it's only $10,000, what I want to do is go back and do the HR
Okay,
electronic one.
so 10,000.
Yes, the file system.
Any other comments or questions? Councilman Fitzwater.
Yeah, I just had some general comments about the budget process as we begin the back and forth on changes. Dating back to our discussions at the end of the last council, it was made very clear that we had some great needs in the police department and public safety. I think we've done some things, hopefully, that to address some of the short-term needs for fire and trying to upgrade some of our stations, but there were some fairly critical needs. And the community came to us, talked about the body cams, which I think our police department has been very supportive in saying that is something that benefits both sides of the community and our professionals that work with us. And we keep kicking this item of police cars down the road. We've got the request for some additional funding to assist in salaries and trying to bump up the pay. And I think we've got some great needs that I'm not sure that we've addressed yet in this budget. However, my concern is, we've had the good fortunate, and, when I was asked about it at the time, I said either a good fortune or a curse of getting the federal money. We've got a huge hole in transit that we're going to have to plug at some point. We've had the luxury of some money to help us plug that hole this year and I guess part of next year. We've got some stormwater issues that we've kicked down the road, and I understand why we've had tight budgets. But my understanding was when we started this, the ARPA, the federal funds discussion, is we were going to have a kind of a general discussion of priorities for the community. And I'm not saying any of those items might not fall into that discussion. But to my knowledge, maybe I missed it. Was it a finance or someplace else? We've never had a prioritization discussion on how we're going to spend that 7.6 million. And part of it is because it's, I think it's still up in the air from the federal government. I think every time we try to poke at it, that a different answer comes back. Yet, I hear of attempts to spend some of those dollars to help us address what ought to be budget needs. If we have needs in the police department, I think we ought to, like all of us do in our own family budget, tighten the belt. And, I know our department and our directors have tightened the belt in some areas. Maybe we need to tighten further. I would like to see us strategically utilize those ARPA funds, but I would first like to see us go back and, as I tried to explain earlier in the year, to look in the cookie jars, and maybe the cookie jars are empty, but first thing out of the box, using funds that are not, we're lucky we have them. More likely we're not going to get them in the future, but what's going on in DC at this point, it just seems like an endless supply of dollars coming. So I guess my comments are, I'm not sure that we hit the priorities. When we all ran for this seat, we talked about public safety, we talked about infrastructure, we talked about economic development. We have a very clear need, immediate need in our police department. And I don't think we've had that discussion as a council outside of the budget process of what are our long-term priorities that we hope to accomplish with those ARPA funds. How are we going to invest them in this community so that we don't have this discussion? So just in general, I'm uncomfortable with the direction this is taken and how we're proposing to use some of those funds. And I really think we need to address the salary issue, the police car issue, the camera issue within this budget and not look at outside dollars as our first go around. So those are my general comments.
That's certainly what we're here to do. And I think part of why we haven't had a full discussion on the ARPA dollar use yet is because we don't have final interim rules from the Treasury Department. Is that about right?
Yes. Now, we've given some general updates to various committees. Part of the thought was that you may want to make sure you had the answers on the capital sales tax and the public safety sales tax, because those funding sources may be able to address some of those items. Then have the discussion about the I don't want to call it a public hearing, but an opportunity for the public to come and talk about the specific, their thoughts and desires for use of the rescue plan money. But very, very generally, a hunk of that money will be used to reimburse. And that's kind of what staff's going through now, is to figure out what some of those reimbursements may be. And so that'll be an amount of money available for use for some of these kinds of things, perhaps. I don't know what that amount is. And then there's, several other uses, and then certainly at the end of that is stormwater. I know that there's been a very big interest in wanting to fund stormwater. So, there's those kinds of needs out there. But specific to your point, the final plan, and Margie and I looked today, it still isn't out. Now, that doesn't mean that there may be any big changes from the interim final plan, as they call it. But even then, some of the uses, there's just a lot of questions about what is eligible or not, and we may not get any further clarification on that. So I don't know how you would plan use of the rescue plan money in this particular budget. I get it that there may be some items that you think you may want to delay until that, and that's certainly appropriate. You've talked about a few of those. But to have that discussion right now, I just think it's premature for the rescue plan money.
So John, you started off by talking about using ARPA, and with that funding police cars. Is that
Yeah, that's not up there right now, Mike.
right? So is that still what your plan? What?
When we reformulate a plan for that, it'll go up on the parking lot.
So I guess.
Well,
How
okay,
does
I'll do. You know what? I'll do it right now. I said I wasn't going to try to fix it in the moment.
How does that type of thing fit with what you just said about ARPA?
It might not. We might have had some miscommunication in the last several weeks. I agree that stormwater is a pressing concern, and that replacing police cars every year is a pressing concern. We try to keep to a schedule with that replacement so we don't get too far behind. Also, certainly agree that body cams are something that the police department has said repeatedly that it wants, and that the community thinks is a good idea. And I think that most of us up here, if not all of us, agree is a top priority. We might have opportunities down the road for specifically to look at the body cam issue. And I apologize again. I thought I had something worked up here that discussed with folks on staff that I think maybe we misunderstood each other. So we'll go back to the drawing board on the cam piece. But I think it's important to take shots at these things with available funding. To borrow and modify as a phrase, to borrow and modify a phrase, you build a budget with the funding sources that you have, not the funding sources that you might want or wish to have at a later time. So let's aim at the police cars first. I have a proposal for 7 police cars. It's $310,000. Sorry, $310,889.44. And then out of the capital improvement sales tax G, out of the 520 that's currently in there for stormwater. But hold on. And then the other piece of that would be $889.44 to eligible stormwater projects out of ARPA, which I think would get us 7 police cars and a total of $1 million even for stormwater projects. We can figure out the pennies, but that's the goal. And that $1 million would come from this almost $541,000 from ARPA, plus what remains in sales tax G and the stormwater line, plus the mayor's $250,000 that she's already put in there from ARPA. It's less than $1 million of the 7.6 from ARPA. I know that, some folks might want to look at one big project or wait to see what how future ballots turn out, or worry about form and mechanics here, but our neighbors trusted us to align available funds and permitted uses to take care of as many pressing needs as we possibly can. And these are, I think, two of our biggest needs. So I'll put that out there. We can't count on future elections. And again, as Councilman Fitzwater said, waiting to see what happens just keeps kicking the can. So, if something positive happens down the road with funding and some streams open up that cover some of these things, we can adjust at that point. I think what's important, though, is that we commit to doing these things with available. So again, I'm not calling for a vote on this tonight. Councilman Schreiber and I, he is as chair of the Public Safety Committee, chatted about the public safety aspect of this particular item, and we're of one mind with this approach. So that's what I'm throwing out there tonight. Councilman Spicer.
Can we add the body cams?
If you have other funds or an approach, I mean, you can certainly put the body cams on the parking lot. You can put the expenditure up there. We're going to need to find, if we want to pay for it in this particular budget, we got to find funding for it. Councilman Spencer.
To kind of echo both you gentlemen's comments and not really relying on the potential dollars that we have, because there's really not clear definitions of what those dollars can go towards. I think it would be prudent to give our staff an opportunity to come up with a percentage of savings across the board from all departments. And it's manageable between 1% to 3%. I don't know, but I think that's a good start to having a discussion to maybe fund some of these and others project lists.
Thank you. Any other comments tonight? Councilwoman Wiseman.
Councilman Hensley, are these going to be on the parking lot for 2 weeks, or will we be voting on some of these next week? Or I mean on Thursday, I guess.
I think traditionally we would be voting on them on Thursday.
Okay.
But if something dies on the parking lot, this metaphor is kind of funny, so it's weird to say these things. But if a vote fails with an item that's on the parking, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. So these things will be coming up Thursday.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Expiring Thursday anyhow.
I guess that really wasn't a suggestion. It was a question if that was an exercise that we'd like to put city staff to go through, to try to trim their own budgets between a discretionary amount that we can discuss. But I think that would help us formulate what's on the parking lot, what's not on the parking lot, and what's available to us as far as additional funds.
Comments on that point? Any other items for discussion, consideration? Councilwoman Ward.
Yes, it's clarification regarding the police cars. You said 7, although we have 9 out there that needing placement still.
Yeah, I didn't. So the most
they're 36,288, which 7 would be 254 and change, and 9.
I thought they were over 44.
They're
apiece.
44,416.80. You're probably looking at last year's budget. Yeah, so what Sheila's put on there is
Each car
7
for
at
radios and
what
stuff.
the pink sheet
Yeah, the
dollar
44.
amount is.
So it still is 7.
Yeah, I wasn't really comfortable going over 350 out of that source, and all 9 would take us over that. So it was, even 8 would take us a little bit over that. So trying to stay in my comfort zone anyway, that particular item, but folks are free to put another one on there if they want.
So a point of clarification, we've had a couple councilmen say they want to fund the body cameras. Did you want to put that up there without a funding source currently, or did you want to wait until there's a
I think
proposed
Councilman,
source
Spicer asked about that. You want to put it up there?
at the amount that's on the pink sheet?
Is there a difference between the amount that's on the pink sheet? Isn't there? I think
It's
I've seen 2 different numbers on this.
475,000.
Okay, because the presentation said 527. Is that, which one should we go with?
There's probably ongoing. There's the capital purchase and then the ongoing.
The 527 would have been if we funded all 5 years with maintenance up front with no ongoing cost. The 475, that would be the year one ongoing with ongoing annual maintenance licensing agreements, things at a cost of just under 8,000 a year with the vendor to keep the licensing. So we could either pay for all 5 years of licensing and maintenance in one lump sum payment and owe nothing for 5 years, or pay for the equipment up front and then just have the ongoing annual maintenance agreement with them and break that out over the 5 years.
110,
And so the 110 would be if we finance them over 5 years. So they would basically give us a line of credit. We would finance the upfront purchase of the hardware and pay the same price over 5 years. So the total for the first 2 is the same over 5 years. If we finance them, the total goes up because they're giving us a line of credit to finance them for 5 years, and they charge about 5% on that overall price.
So that's a discount of going ahead and pay the lump sum of the 5 years of licensing and all that. There is a little bit of a savings there in that.
There's a savings there because we don't have to pay Panasonic or Turnkey Mobile to borrow their money to give us the upfront cost of the camera purchase. So if we pay for the entire purchase up front, there's no financing involved.
Okay, but going ahead and paying in the 5 years in advance, there's really no savings
There's no savings between
versus year one versus 5.
if we're talking between the 500,000 and the 400,000, there's no savings. It's just we take those $8,000 payments and put them all in year one instead of over 5 years.
And we typically do not pay in advance on any contract. So it's not normal.
Councilwoman Ward.
And going back to the police cars, the list says 44.4, but the actual pink sheet says 36,288. So I just want to clarify.
And Laura, there's
they
2
are-
lines on that pink sheet. So there's the cost of the vehicle, and then a little bit further down, if you keep
Okay,
scrolling,
the
is the equipment
Gotcha,
to be added to it.
gotcha.
Mhm.
The full amount.
Okay, so sounds like the 527 would be something that we wouldn't normally do, right?
No.
And the 110 comes with greater long-term expense. So we want the 475 on there. Great. We just need to find $475,000. It's all right. We have 3 days to do it. What's that? Any other comments or suggestions? It's pretty early still. We'll give another 30 seconds for any final points of wisdom before we adjourn until Thursday. Going once, going twice. Anybody? Oh, Councilman Fitzwater.
Just to follow up, and I appreciate Mr. Kroll's response. I think we're basically saying the same thing. Does it make sense for us to have some kind of discussion of priorities before we start taking out of this pool of funds? Because typically our list is like kids at Christmas. It's always bigger than what
Yeah.
the budget. And, that's a good thing that we've got needs. But before we start doling out dollars and then get to the end and say, oh, wow, we missed a big one? Or do you think we're not far enough along for this budget process to be able to have that kind of a discussion?
Depending on your time, we certainly can have that discussion on the rescue plan, ARPA funds. The thought that we talked about at committee was to be able to have an opportunity for public and different organizations to come in and talk about what their needs are to be, then to take those and try to prioritize those in a list and have a discussion with council. I guess I think of the ARPA funds as additions, as add-ons, as additional kinds of things, not regular operating kinds of things, other than the list that comes off the top, I'll call it, for reimbursing the city for reimbursable kinds of expenses, admin fees, personal protective equipment that we've already bought, COVID-related kinds of things that have already been purchased. So there's some of those that can be reimburse ourselves, and then that money can certainly be used for anything that council desires. And then there's a couple of big questions that probably should be discussed in context with all the other things that are on the list. So it doesn't, my hesitancy in having the discussion now is just that you've got a couple of, you've got certainly a public safety tax vote coming up. I don't know what that impact would be on that, but we certainly can spend a night talking about those kinds of things if that's what you want to do. I'd rather try to get some better clarity on what kinds of things specifically are allowed. I don't know that we're going to get that any more than what we already have. And then there's some major questions that council is going to have to answer related to that. So give me a very good answer. I mean, certainly we can have it. If you want to have that, we certainly can. I would want to get, I would suggest getting that input from the public first. Get whatever those priorities are. We can pretty much guess what those are, but I think get those. And I think another big question is, really what's the county's obligation for some of the kinds of things like housing? Rental housing and affordable housing, is the county going to help participate in those if we want to do anything, if council wants to do anything related along those lines? Or are we going to say it's solely a county function? Trying to have some of those conversations with the county, but haven't gotten any decisions on that yet. So it doesn't hurt, but I just think it's a big question. I just think of those as additional kinds of things, but I just don't know that the timing's the best.
Well,
for
and
it
then
right now.
the new supposed infrastructure bill that is coming out. I mean, apparently there's going to be broadband money in it and a number of other.
Yeah,
I don't know how
infrastructure,
far down.
whatever you're going to define as infrastructure, then how does that, if there was something that was for a stormwater project, for example, is that going to be out of ARPA funds? Well, if infrastructure comes out, maybe we could take that and use that for stormwater funds, which means now you've got more ARPA funds available for whatever those kinds of things are that you want to use. It's a question on employee contributions. What does that look like? Does council want to do something there? And what are some of the options and some of that?
As soon as we have Councilman Cumden.
I apologize. Did you guys hear me? You want me to start over? I feel like the public would come and say stormwater is one of their primary needs. I mean, but we can have that discussion with the public. If that's what they say, we can wait. But I feel like what you propose would be a top priority. And it is and has been for years. So I'm not too hesitant to use it for the ARPA funds as we are right now. Because I feel like that would be a public input. They would say this is a top priority.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I was comfortable with that as well. I think even given the full universe of allowable uses, I think stormwater is eligible stormwater improvements projects are going to be high on any list. And as soon as we have a final interim rule and all of the guidance that will come, the finance committee will discuss this regular meeting, and I'm sure we'll also have some work sessions with the whole council on this topic. Yeah, any other comments or questions? Councilman Spicer.
I had a question for the chief. I was just wanted to see if you kind of explained to me a little bit about your guys' use of the rave.
Well, if I might, I'll defer to Lieutenant Steverman. He was a part of the development of that program, and he just recently prepared a report, kind of an update to
Okay.
answer that very question. So he can easily refer to a report that he submitted today, as a matter of fact, if it's okay with the chair.
Councilwoman Warren.
Please.
Yeah, so, the rave conversation comes up quite a bit. So there's a lot of different aspects to the rave software that we use. It's not always very public facing. It's a very intricate part of the system that we utilize on a daily basis in the 911 center. And it's not just a police department funded thing. I mean, the city pays for 10% of the use of it. But rave is used by by obviously the Jeff City Police Department. The Jeff City Fire Department is starting to utilize it as well. They're going through some testing to see if it's going to fit some needs for them also. Jeff City Transit uses it, Cole County Public Works, Cole County Emergency Response, Cole County Sheriff's Department. The Emergency Operations Center, we utilized it during the rave when the EOC was operational so the committee members could talk to each other. Cole County Emergency Management uses it. We've currently got 398 internal employees between city and county that receive messages from that on a daily basis for interdepartmental communications. The public-facing side of it, we send out traffic alerts. We got one for missing and endangered people, and luckily we really haven't had to utilize some of those to yet. We're currently working on ways to get our media releases to go out through there to make the media release process simpler to use. Jeff City Transit, they've got a ridership keyword where people can text in a keyword to that so they can push out ridership updates if there's major changes in routes or dates that they've got to close due to COVID. On the automated side, we utilize it for the major public storm alerts. And that's more of the public mass notification side of it, is that automates all of those storm alerts to the public. And in addition, so down in the 911 center, these are stats for 365 days. So for a one rolling year. So the community members are able to sign up for a Smart 911 account. And normally it's the most vulnerable people within our community that sign up for those accounts because they want the 911 center to have the information that they need to adequately respond to an emergency if they call us. We've currently got just under 2,000 residents within our area that have a Smart 911 account. And we had 314 of those accounts actually provide usable information over the last rolling 12 months. Information that first responders are able to utilize to make sure we get the most appropriate response to that vulnerable part of our community. Another partnership is with Lincoln University. Since we went with Rave, they went ahead and purchased a Guardian side of that, which is for the universities. So they upload all of their student information into there. So if we get a 911 call from a Lincoln University enrolled student, we get that information in our center as well. So we know who that student is, that they are a student, and can provide that information back to LUPD if needed. This system also allows us to initiate 911 text messages with our caller. So if we get a 911 hang up from a cell phone and they won't answer the phone back, it gives us the ability to text that person where our 911 operator initiates that conversation with them over text message to make sure there's not an emergency. And that was used 594 times over the last 365 days. So more, on an average, more than once a day, we are initiating text conversations through our 911 system. It provided us 13,370 rapid SOS locations, which is a more enhanced location than we get from the cell phone providers from their towers. It gives us a more precise location of that 911 caller. On average per month, we've got 3,576 individual devices that receive a text message from us in some fashion, whether it's internal or public alert. So we're sending almost 3,500 devices a text message a month. So it is, and another one is, we're working with the schools. They've got a school alerting platform as well. And Halai has just purchased Rave to utilize within their parochial school system, which by them getting on the system as well, if they hit their panic button for an active shooter event or a medical emergency or a fire, it gives us instantaneous notification in our 911 center that that app has activated that system and gives us response instructions before they ever call 911. So it's streamlining our ability to respond to certain areas in town and to certain emergencies that we wouldn't have if we were to get rid of it. So I know there's not a lot of public facing side that a lot of people see on it on a daily basis, but it is a very intricate part of our 911 operations and the service that we provide to the citizens of the community on a daily basis. There's also all the surrounding counties that border us that also utilize the Rave platform and Smart 911. So anytime we get one of those callers that is on the border of our county, we get that information even if they're not a member of so even though we've got just under 2,000 registered users on our Smart 911 platform, we can multiply that exponentially with all the surrounding communities that also utilize Smart 911 and Rave, to where when those people are commuting into our community are close enough that their 911 call bounces to our PSAP and not Boone counties or Montauk counties or Osage counties, we still get that information for that user and can provide timely resources and transfer that information out to the appropriate PSAP, knowing where they're calling from. So it's a service we use on a daily basis to provide the best possible 911 service to our community.
Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Wiseman.
You indicated that you have only 2,000 users at this point. How many years have we been utilizing this system?
So I believe if we enter into this contract, it'll be our third year. We've got 2 completed years of the Rave system.
Okay, so we're going on our third year and we only have 2,000 people in it.
2,000 people in our community that have chosen to fill out a Smart 911 profile.
So this was sold to us as an app that was going to notify our citizens of events in the city. I have noted a couple that have never been sent out to people, such as shootings over by, I think there was a shooting over at Old Navy that was never sent out to people. There are wrecks that are not sent out to people to notify the public. What exactly are we notifying the public of?
So we have got a protocol that is written, and those notifications are sent out based on the on-scene commander and their decision to send those out. So the communications operators don't have just free will to send out anything that they want to send out. So it's got to meet a certain level of public danger to be able to send those out, or public inconvenience. So there's a lot of crashes that don't go out across the Rave platform just because they don't meet the prescribed criteria that we have written for them to meet, which is major thoroughfare, rush hour, major traffic disruption. And I'm not going to say we're perfect. I mean, when there's a human aspect built into it, there's always room for error. So there's probably some that have gone out that probably didn't meet the criteria, but the on-scene law enforcement commander there requested that they go out. So the communications operator following the protocol is that if they're requested by the on-scene commander, they get sent out. And there's probably some that should have been sent out that weren't because the on-scene commander didn't request that a communications operator send that alert out. So there's going to be some that are missed. As far as the shooting on Alta, I don't see where there was the officers arrived on scene to investigate it. a shooting occurred and there was no ongoing threat to the public, which there's no need to alert the public if there's no threat to the public.
So that went out on Twitter and Facebook, though. Is that correct?
The press release afterwards might have gone out on Twitter and Facebook, and if anything was going out on Twitter and Facebook pre-press release, it was citizens in the community that were sending that out.
So you think it was quite a bit after the shooting that I'm specifically talking about the Ulta shooting that was in public. Do you think it was quite a bit after the Ulta shooting that there was a press release given to Twitter and Facebook?
I would have to research back and find out when Lieutenant Williams released that press release and what the time frame was, but
And you don't necessarily think it's important that the public stay away from the area while you guys are investigating and securing the crime scene?
well, a lot of times if we would send something out like that, we invite the public to come there and see it. So a lot of people, I think in some of those situations, it would create the looky-loos to want to come and see what's going on there because they were told to stay away from the area as opposed to us just controlling a closed crime scene.
So theoretically, wouldn't that work the same with a traffic accident? You don't want to tell anybody so that way nobody shows up?
Well, the traffic accident, we're going to divert the traffic. The roads are already closed anyway, so we're diverting the traffic around it. And if we can keep the majority of the cars from entering that area, it increases our ability to control the traffic flow and keep it flowing adequately.
Councilman Spencer.
This is a question for you, Margie. Could you give us a little bit of cost analysis for the administrative chargebacks if we use the same formulas citywide or Parks and Rec on their chargeback for administrative fees?
Okay, I think the file for the administrative chargeback was shared with all the members of the committee. I mean, it's an allocation method that has been used for years. It is considered to be a best practice in governmental accounting to do. It can be termed indirect cost allocation, administrative chargebacks. It amounts to the same thing, and that's basically taking our administrative departments, the city clerk, city administrator, city attorney, human resources, finance, non-departmental, IT, GIS, and mayor and council, taking that almost $3.5 million and splitting it between all of the other departments, including the general fund departments. But with the general fund departments, I'm not proposing that we take in revenue from our general fund departments and have them have the expense in their budget because it's a wash. And all it does is inflate the budget numbers. So the allocation is the same, but then the only entries are on those enterprise and special revenue funds that are totally separate from general revenue, where there's a line in their budget for the administrative chargebacks as an expense, and then a corresponding revenue line in the general fund for those revenues. So if you look at the spreadsheet that was sent, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. Did I answer your question?
Not really. I guess
Okay.
what I'm asking for is a comparison to what we're doing now to what you would be proposing. So if we use the same dollars for 2021 as our basis, what would the difference be increase wise? Not 2022, but 2021 using that as a reference point.
So if you look at the administrative chargebacks revenue line, you can see the history of what those chargebacks total every year. So on page 17, what we've actually charged by year is reflected there. So in FY18, it was almost 1.6 million. FY19, 1,558,000. FY20, 1,555,000. The adopted 21 budget and what has already been charged in 21 is the 1,561,000, and then what's proposed for FY22 using the same allocation methodology is 1,600,000 and almost 15,000. Was that your question?
So what would Parks and Rec's share of that be?
What is in the FY22 proposed budget, the parks amount that's being charged as an administrative chargeback is $302,680, and it's in their line item in the parks admin budget. Okay, so if you're asking what the calculation is versus what's in the budget,
Yes.
okay, the calculation is $501,733. And we have looked at the history of this to see what kind of notes or documentation or background of why Parks wasn't, why the amount was different than the calculated amount according to the formula. And what we found was in 2006 or 2009, there was a note that instead of using that formula that the amount was going to be 5% of the sales tax collected for the previous 12 months for parks. And that's where the $302,680 comes from.
So we were doing it consistently in 2006, 7, and 8.
No,
But then 2009, we changed.
we couldn't tell if it was cut back in those years. There's not enough documentation. But there is a note that starts in FY 2009 that states that.
Doesn't surprise me. Okay, thank you. So that would be an additional dollars if we did the consistent chargeback of about $200,000.
Close to 200,000. Yeah.
198 and somewhere in there.
Any other comments or questions? Councilman Fitzwater.
Just want to get back to the discussion on police salaries. We've got a few minutes. We've lost a few officers recently. Is that accurate, Chief?
Yes, we've lost a lot of officers recently.
And how's recruiting going as far as trying to attract new officers?
Well, it's difficult, and that's, I think as I indicated last week, it's difficult nationally, and we're just experiencing the same thing that other agencies are. I think if you take it in real simplistic terms, we typically for many, many years would receive over 200 applicants each year annually, and now we're fortunate if we receive approximately 60. So you can compute that simple math and see the percentage of drop. Process remains the same. The recruitment has been increased. I mean, we try all means of recruitment, getting the word out, and it's just very, very difficult. There are just very few people that want to enter the field of law enforcement, and anyone who can retire or move to other higher paying jobs, and our people are certainly capable of that, they do.
One of the things we discussed in the earlier part of the year was the starting salary. I know we've had the across the board increase. Do we do or can we do a sign-on bonus for departments?
Well, I mean,
Sign-on
it would
stipend?
require an approval, but yes, we've talked about that and some type of incentive certainly being considered. I think we could do that, and we're close to making that decision. Some other factors involved that caused us to hesitate just a little bit. But
I know it
the
has a
timing
ripple
has to
effect.
be correct, and we're kind of all recruitment process, which we do 2 a year, and so we've begun that, and we're really pointing to probably of October, November, when we would initiate that, so that it would be consistent with, or certainly maybe later, toward the end of the year, consistent with our recruitment for the academy that begins in the May, June timeframe of '22.
Could sales, that pool of funds left in sales tax G, could that be used for those purposes? Doesn't fit within the dollars that would go, doesn't fit within the definition of how those
A
dollars.
a
are
lump
supposed to
sum
be
payment, an incentive, hiring incentive.
Well, some way to bump.
Yeah, for capital, my answer would be no. Margie and Ryan may have a different answer, but I don't see that as a capital expense necessarily.
Definitive no.
But we could try to find it somewhere else.
Yes.
In the budget.
Yeah, I think for that amount, it could come out of the existing,
I guess me as one vote, I mean, I would need some guidance. I mean, I'd be willing to work on that if there was something of interest. But again, if there are ripple effects that make things worse.
staff has talked about it. I'm sorry, staff has talked about it, and they're
Good.
working on
Right.
some timing related there too.
Okay, and then just one final comment. I thought Councilman Spencer raised an interesting issue at trying to squeeze as much as we can out. So to me, it seems like it may be a worthwhile exercise. I don't know how, it's easy to sit here and say that, and people have to actually do that task, but to verify that we are squeezing as much as we can, it seems like it may be shooting for a 1%, given the fact that we don't spend 2% to try to find 1%. Might be at least worth talking about at some point. I don't know if people are ready to talk about it tonight, but.
Councilman Spencer.
Well, no, my only suggestion is because of time. Might take them some extra time to really dig deep in their budget. So I don't know how long an exercise that would take. So, but also just to echo some of the comments tonight, we hear about the police and detention issues and that, but fire's in the same boat. I keep thinking we're kind of forgetting the fire department as well when we talk about that. But ARPA has some funds available for, and I will not try to use the term that we don't like to use, but one-time salary enhancements. We don't want to call them bonuses. Has that been explored for, and I'd like to open that up not only for our police and our fire, but our transit drivers, folks like that were immediately out in the front lines as it related to COVID.
Yes, staff has talked about that. There's some parameters on that. That would be part of the discussion of the larger issue with the city council whenever you all choose to have that discussion. But it's probably looking more like a lump sum kind of a payment rather than a non.
True. And that's what I'm hearing too. But I've also heard that the state is kind of holding some of those funds back, and maybe they're starting to release some of those.
We've received we've received our first tranche of the funds. So our funding comes directly to us. So we don't have to rely on the state to release any of those funds.
But I think, according to some of the resources I have, there are funds available strictly available to public safety entities. And maybe the fire chief would have some information on that as well. So I'm describing it coming out of the right pool of funds, but I thought it was tied in with ARPA, but maybe I'm incorrect with that.
The only funds that I'm aware of and it's not our term, it's their term, premium pay. They're calling it for.
That's it. Thank you.
Essential workers. And so that would potentially be defined beyond public safety as well, is that those are the same funding mechanisms as the tranche of funds that city administrators mentioned. So that's my only.
So that is all in one and the same.
Well, one and the same, but the city has received a direct allocation as an entitlement community of the 7.5 million, of which we've received our first tranche. The state has got money for the state and non-entitlement cities. Now, they also have some funding opportunities like all the CDBG and different kinds of funding opportunities that may open up. And then there's a question about whether an entitlement city, a city that receives their money directly, would be eligible to apply for those. In some cases they are, but I'm not aware of, doesn't mean there isn't, but I'm not aware of an additional opportunity for applying for salary related kinds of payments through state related rescue plan money.
Councilman Lester.
A question about, I guess you'd say consistency of application of budget process related to administrative services chargeback. I'm thinking about like the sales tax H. Certainly there's some administrative processes that, you know, support that sales tax. And I know it's not the same as the others.
No,
but
it is different because the administrative chargebacks is supposed to be an allocation for the services provided by HR, legal, finance, and sales tax G and sales tax H are project related. So there's no administrative chargebacks to that fund.
I know, I understand what you said, but there's administrative services that support that. Right? I mean,
I don't think an administrative chargeback would be an allowable expense under that particular funding source. So the state statute that allows for capital improvements sales tax is pretty definitive on what it can be paid for. And essentially it's fixed goods that have a minimum useful life of 2 years. And then recently they've added software. But it's fairly narrow, and so I've never seen a city try to do an administrative chargeback off of the capital improvement sales tax. I don't think it's allowed.
If I could say though that once we do the implementation of the project, I mean, it's one thing to fund a bridge, for example, but once we get into doing the bridge building and all of that, then you know, those kinds of fees are taken care of through the regular administrative chargeback. Can I just add while we're on this topic, part of our current sales tax G, one of the things that we do typically a little bit later on in the years we get closer to, or even after the end of the fiscal year, is what we typically have called gleaning, where we look at projects and see what may be remaining from either what's anticipated or what has been spent. And then there's also a little bit of extra money that comes in. So to Councilmember Spencer's point, staff could try to go through now, although as I said, it's a little bit earlier than we typically would do, but try to identify what that amount may be, so you can get an idea of what funding there may be in the current sales tax G. And of course, you know, sales tax H is passed, so that's another funding source.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm not going to give you another chance like I did a half hour ago. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to stop for tonight. We'll be back here Thursday evening. The items that are on the parking lot will be revisited and either adopted or expire. And we'll continue on. So if you had ideas from tonight or the kernel of an idea from tonight that you would like to explore some more, let's just figure out over the next few days how to turn that into a productive exercise for Thursday or next month, or I guess this coming Thursday or next week, Thursday. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.